I am Abigail Martin, 32 years old, and last year my parents sent me a text that shattered my holiday plans. We think it would be best if you skip Thanksgiving this year. We need some space. The message appeared on my phone while I was preparing dinner in my newly purchased Vermont farmhouse. After 15 years of being the dutiful daughter who never missed a family gathering, I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My fingers trembled as I typed my response. Have a lovely, quiet Thanksgiving. They had no idea what I was about to do next. Before I continue with my story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you want to hear more about family dynamics and how I turned rejection into the best holiday of my life. To understand why this rejection hurt so deeply, you need to know about my relationship with my parents, Eleanor and James Martin. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I was always the reliable daughter. While other kids were rebelling or causing trouble, I was the one who maintained perfect grades, helped around the house, and never missed family dinners. I organized birthday celebrations, remembered anniversaries, and was essentially the family glue. My parents owned a successful insurance agency and had clear expectations for their children. My brother David, 2 years younger than me, followed the expected path by becoming an accountant and marrying Pamela, the daughter of one of my father's golf buddies. I, however, had different dreams. From the time I was 10, I knew I wanted to be a chef. The kitchen was my sanctuary where I would experiment with recipes while watching cooking shows. When I announced my intention to attend culinary school instead of pursuing business or law as my parents had hoped, they were visibly disappointed. Cooking is a hobby, Abby, not a career, my mother said. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Think about your future. Restaurant work is for people who cannot do better. Despite their disapproval, I enrolled in the Culinary Institute of America. To their surprise, I thrived. After graduation, I worked my way up through prestigious restaurants in New York, eventually becoming the executive chef at a critically acclaimed farm-to-table establishment. 3 years ago, I launched a successful YouTube cooking channel and published my first cookbook, which became a bestseller. Throughout my 20s, even as my career flourished, I maintained my role as the dutiful daughter. I drove 3 hours each way for Sunday dinners twice a month. I called my mother daily. I organized and cooked for all family gatherings. Thanksgiving was particularly important in our family, with me taking over more of the cooking responsibilities each year as my mother claimed to be passing the torch. When I turned 31, I finally achieved my dream of buying a farmhouse in rural Vermont. It was a charming property on 5 acres with an upgraded kitchen, a vegetable garden, and even a small apple orchard. The house needed some work, but it had character and potential. I was ecstatic. My parents were less enthusiastic. Vermont. That is so isolated. Why would you want to live in the middle of nowhere? My mother questioned. What she really meant was that I would be 2 hours farther away from them. The move created a subtle but noticeable shift in our relationship. My daily calls became every other day, then twice a week. When I missed a Sunday dinner due to a basement flood in my new home, my mother acted as though I had committed an unforgivable offense. Meanwhile, my brother David and his wife Pamela continued to live just 15 minutes from my parents. They had given my parents their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas, the previous year. During our increasingly infrequent phone calls, my mother would drop comments like, "David and Pamela brought Thomas over yesterday." It was so wonderful to have family close by. The emphasis on family stung, as though my geographical distance had somehow removed me from that category. Looking back, I can see the signs of my parents' emotional manipulation that I had normalized. The passive-aggressive comments, the comparisons to my brother, the subtle guilt trips, and the way they withheld affection when I failed to meet their expectations. When I was promoted at the restaurant, my father's first question was not, "Congratulations," but, "Will you have time to visit us with your new responsibilities?" Their obsession with appearances and social status also became more apparent as I gained distance. They were more concerned with how things looked to their friends than with how their children actually felt. When my cookbook was published, they proudly displayed it in their living room, but admitted they had not tried any of the recipes. The photographs are lovely, my mother said, as though I had merely modeled for the book rather than created every recipe. Still, despite these frustrations, I never imagined they would exclude me from a family holiday. Thanksgiving had always been sacred, the one time of year when everyone put aside their differences and came together. Even during my busiest years in New York, I had always made the trip home for Thanksgiving, often driving through the night after my restaurant closed on Wednesday. That was why their text message sent on a crisp November morning just 3 weeks before Thanksgiving caught me so completely off guard. I still remember exactly where I was standing when I received the message. In my kitchen, slicing apples for a pie, sunlight streaming through the windows overlooking the orchard. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I absent-mindedly picked it up, expecting perhaps a delivery notification or a message from a friend. Instead, I saw my mother's name and the preview of a message that made me freeze about Thanksgiving this year. I opened the full message with a sense of foreboding. Abby, your father and I have been talking, and we think it would be best if you skip Thanksgiving this year. We need some space and are planning a smaller gathering. We will catch up with you another time. Love, Mom. I read the message once, twice, 3 times, unable to process the words. Skip Thanksgiving needs space. What did that even mean? We had spent every Thanksgiving together for my entire life. Even during the height of the pandemic, we had connected via video call for our meal. My hands trembled as I set down my knife and leaned against the counter. Perhaps there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe they were not feeling well or had decided to take a trip. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice overly bright. Abby dear, how are you? Mom, I just got your text about Thanksgiving. What is going on? Are you and Dad okay? There was a pause, and I could practically see her arranging her face into the polite mask she wore when delivering unpleasant news. We are fine, darling. We just thought we would do something simpler this year. Small and intimate. Simpler. But Thanksgiving is our tradition. I was planning to drive down on Wednesday. I already requested the time off work. Another pause. Well, it is a long drive for you now that you have moved so far away. We thought we would save you the trouble. Something in her tone made me suspicious. Who else will be there for this smaller gathering? My mother cleared her throat. Just us and David's family. Thomas is at such a fun age now, and Pamela is expecting again, you know. She is not feeling well with the morning sickness, so we thought a quiet family dinner would be best. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was being excluded from family dinner while my brother and his wife were still invited. I was the only one being asked to skip the holiday. So, it is not actually about having a smaller gathering, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. It is about not having me there. Now, Abby, do not make this into something it is not, my mother said, her tone sharpening. We just need a little space this year. You are so busy with your career and that new house. We thought you would appreciate the break. Did I do something wrong? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. No, nothing like that, she replied too quickly. Your father and I feel like you have been pulling away since you moved. You call less, visit less. Maybe this break will be good for all of us. My father's voice suddenly came on the line. He must have been listening. Abby, it is just one Thanksgiving. Do not make a big deal out of it. We will see you for Christmas. The casual dismissal of my feelings after years of loyalty felt like a slap. I ended the call shortly after promising to think about it, though there was nothing to think about. They had already made their decision. After hanging up, I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for the first time in years. The hurt was profound. A deep ache that felt physical. All those years of driving hours to Sunday, dinners of calling daily, of organizing family events, of being the perfect daughter, and this was my reward. Being cast aside without a second thought, I cycled through emotions rapid fire. Hurt gave way to anger. How dare they exclude me like this? Then came confusion. Had I really been pulling away? Or was that their perception because I was no longer at their beck and call? Was this punishment for moving farther away? for prioritizing my career and happiness. Then came the bargaining phase. Maybe if I called back and promised to visit more, they would change their minds. Maybe if I offered to do all the cooking to make it easier for everyone. Finally, as the sun began to set and my kitchen grew dark, a strange calm settled over me. I had spent my entire life trying to please my parents, contorting myself to fit their expectations, putting their needs above my own. And here I was, a successful chef with a beautiful home and a career I loved, sitting alone on my kitchen floor crying because they had rejected me. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I stood up, wiped my tears, and looked around at my farmhouse kitchen, the home I had worked so hard to create. Why was I letting them dictate my happiness? If they did not want me at their Thanksgiving, fine. I would create my own. I picked up my phone and texted back the reply that would set everything in motion. Have a lovely, quiet Thanksgiving. After sending that text, I did what any self-respecting 30-something woman would do after being rejected by her family. I grabbed a pint of ice cream from the freezer and settled onto my couch for a proper wallow in self-pity. Rocky Road had just begun to work its magic when my phone rang. It was my best friend Sarah calling for our weekly catch-up. "You sound terrible," she said immediately. "What happened?" The whole story poured out of me between spoonfuls of ice cream, my voice cracking when I repeated my mother's words. "Those jerks," Sarah exclaimed when I finished. "Who excludes their daughter from Thanksgiving? That is some seriously twisted behavior." "Maybe they are right," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "I have been calling less since I moved. Maybe I have been a bad daughter." "Stop that right now," Sarah said firmly. "You have been bending over backward for those people your entire life. One boundary moving to a place that makes you happy, and suddenly you are persona non grata at Thanksgiving. That is not normal, Abby." The validation from an outside perspective helped clear some of the fog of self-doubt. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know what? If they do not want you at their Thanksgiving, host your own." I laughed weakly. "Right Thanksgiving for one. How festive." "Not for one, you goose. For friends. A Friendsgiving. I will come up from Boston. You must know other people who do not have solid plans yet." The idea seemed absurd at first. I had never hosted a major holiday on my own. Thanksgiving had always been at my parents' house with me as helper rather than host. But as Sarah continued talking, enthusiasm building in her voice, I felt a tiny spark of excitement ignite. "Think about it," she urged. "You have this gorgeous farmhouse you have been dying to entertain in. You are literally a professional chef. You could create the most amazing meal. And instead of tiptoeing around your mother's passive-aggressive comments all day, you would be surrounded by people who actually appreciate you." By the time we hung up, the spark had grown into a flame. I opened my contacts list and began scrolling, making a mental list of people who might not have concrete Thanksgiving plans. There was Miguel, my sous chef from New York who had recently moved to Burlington. Jasmine and Tyler, a couple I had befriended at the farmer's market who had mentioned their families lived on the West Coast. My neighbor, Frank, an elderly widower who had brought me homemade jam when I first moved in. Several colleagues from the restaurant in New Hampshire where I now consulted. Friends from culinary school who had scattered across New England. Before I could second-guess myself, I drafted a message, hosting a Friendsgiving at my farmhouse in Vermont on Thanksgiving Day. Good food, good company, no drama. Let me know if you would like to join. I sent it to 15 people, expecting maybe 5 or 6 to accept. To my surprise, responses started coming in immediately. Miguel was grateful to avoid a shift at his restaurant. Jasmine and Tyler were enthusiastic, offering to bring wine from their small vineyard. Frank responded with a phone call, his voice wavering with emotion as he accepted. By the following morning, I had 12 confirmed guests, with several asking if they could bring friends or significant others. I told them all. Yes, the more the merrier. What had started as a desperate alternative was transforming into something exciting. I threw myself into planning with professional zeal. This would not be a haphazard potluck, but a proper feast, showcasing local Vermont ingredients and my own culinary skills. I designed a menu that honored traditional Thanksgiving flavors, while incorporating creative twists: heritage turkey with a cider brine, cornbread stuffing with local sausage and foraged mushrooms, maple roasted root vegetables, Parker House, rolls from scratch, and for dessert, an array of pies featuring apples from my own orchard. I placed special orders with local farms for a 20-pound heritage turkey, fresh cranberries, and various vegetables. I spent evenings after work clearing out my dining room, which had become something of a storage area since I moved in. I found a long farm table at an antique store that would seat 16 and supplemented with a second table for overflow. The more I planned, the more therapeutic it felt. Each decision was mine alone, without having to consider my mother's preferences or traditions. There would be no arguments about whether the stuffing should include oysters, my father's insistence, or whether the mashed potatoes had too much garlic, my mother's perennial complaint. I announced my gathering on Instagram and Facebook, being careful to post only to my personal accounts that my parents did not follow. Hosting my first Thanksgiving in my new home, I wrote alongside a photo of my dining room transformation, "Cannot wait to fill this table with friends old and new." The post received dozens of enthusiastic comments, many from colleagues in the culinary world. A food stylist I had worked with offered to help with table decor. A wine distributor I knew promised to send a case of perfect pairings. Each offer of support helped heal the wound of my parents' rejection a little more. A week before Thanksgiving, my guest list had grown to 22 people. What had begun as a last-minute alternative had evolved into an event I was genuinely excited about. I created detailed prep schedules, ordered extra chairs, and splurged on new serving platters. When I finally fell asleep each night, it was no longer with thoughts of what I was missing at my parents' house, but with anticipation for the gathering I was creating in my own home. The Monday before Thanksgiving, 3 days after I had finalized my guest list and menu, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Just checking that you are okay with the Thanksgiving arrangements. Have you made alternative plans?" I stared at the message, recognizing it for what it was. Not genuine concern for my well-being, but a search for reassurance that I was not upset with them. Perhaps a twinge of guilt had finally set in. I considered ignoring it, but instead replied with deliberate cheerfulness, "Have a lovely, quiet Thanksgiving." No mention of my own plans. No opening for further conversation. The same words I had sent when they first uninvited me. My mother did not reply. With that interaction behind me, I threw myself into preparations with renewed focus. Tuesday morning found me at a farmer's market in Brattleboro, filling my car with locally grown produce. The farm that was providing my heritage turkey had promised it would be ready for pickup on Wednesday, freshly processed and never frozen. Back home, I transformed my kitchen into a prep station worthy of a restaurant. Each recipe was printed and placed in protective sleeves, ingredients measured and organized, equipment laid out in order of use. Years of professional kitchen work had taught me the value of mise en place, having everything in its place before beginning to cook. Sarah arrived Tuesday evening, having taken the entire week off to help. Together, we tackled the tasks that could be done in advance: cranberry sauce, pie dough, turkey brine, chopping vegetables. We worked with the easy rhythm of friends who had cooked together many times before, music playing, wine glasses periodically refilled. "Tell me honestly," Sarah said as she crimped the edge of a pie crust. "Are you still upset about your parents?" I considered the question as I stirred the cranberry sauce. Yes and no. I am hurt that they excluded me so casually, but I am also grateful in a strange way. Without that rejection, I would never have created this. I gestured around my kitchen at the preparations for what was shaping up to be a magnificent feast. "Well, I think it is their loss," Sarah said firmly. "Just wait until they see what they missed." Wednesday brought even more activity. The turkey arrived, all 23 pounds of it, along with my neighbor Frank, who insisted on helping carry it in. "Biggest bird I have seen in years," he commented with approval. "Reminds me of the ones my late wife used to prepare." Miguel drove up from Burlington with cases of professional kitchen equipment he had borrowed from his restaurant, additional roasting pans, serving platters, and a commercial immersion blender that would make the silkiest mashed potatoes imaginable. He brought his boyfriend Luis, and the two of them took over my second bathroom to shower away the restaurant grease before diving into meal prep. By Wednesday afternoon, my house was filled with delicious aromas and the sounds of chopping, stirring, and friendly conversation. Jasmine and Tyler arrived with not only the promised wine but also decorations for the table gourds, miniature pumpkins, and beeswax candles they had made themselves. As I surveyed my increasingly crowded kitchen, I realized something important was happening. This gathering of friends, some old and some new, was creating a different kind of family atmosphere. There was none of the tension that typically underscored holidays with my parents, no walking on eggshells or carefully avoiding certain topics. Just warmth, cooperation, and genuine excitement for the meal we were creating together. That evening, as we all sat around my living room eating pizza, I had ordered to give us a break from cooking. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister, whom I had always been close with despite the geographical distance between us. "Abby, darling, how are you?" she asked, her familiar voice bringing an unexpected lump to my throat. "I am great, Aunt Catherine. How about you, all ready for tomorrow?" There was a pause. "Actually, that is why I am calling. Your mother mentioned you would not be joining them for Thanksgiving this year. She said it was your choice. Something about being too busy with work." The lie stunned me into momentary silence. "That is not exactly how it happened." I finally managed. "I suspected as much," Aunt Catherine replied. "Want to tell me the real story?" As my friends continued their conversations around me, I stepped onto the porch and told my aunt everything from the initial text to my plans for my own Thanksgiving celebration. "Those two," she sighed when I finished. "Your mother has always had a controlling streak, but this is beyond the pale. To uninvite her own daughter from Thanksgiving and then lie about it, I have half a mind to skip their dinner myself." "You do not have to do that," I said quickly. "Well, perhaps I want to." "Tell me, is there room for one more at your table? I would much rather celebrate with you than sit through another of your mother's performative family gatherings." The offer brought tears to my eyes. Having a family member choose me over my parents' event felt like validation I had not realized I needed. "We would love to have you," I said. "But will not that create drama with Mom?" "Let me worry about your mother," Aunt Catherine said with a chuckle. "I will tell her I am coming down with something and cannot make it. She never visits the sick, so she will not question it. Text me your address, darling. I will see you tomorrow." That call shifted something in me. The last lingering feelings of being the one excluded, the one not wanted, began to dissolve. I was creating something genuine and joyful in my home, something that people actually wanted to be part of, including my own family member, who was choosing my table over my parents'. As I returned to the living room, I looked at the friends gathered there, all of whom had chosen to spend their holiday with me. For the first time since receiving that text from my mother, I felt completely at peace with how things had turned out. I woke before dawn on Thanksgiving morning, the sky outside my farmhouse windows still dark. For a moment, disorientation washed over me, the kind that comes with holidays spent in a new place. This would be my first Thanksgiving away from my parents' home, the first one I would host entirely on my own. The weight of that realization pressed on my chest briefly before excitement pushed it aside. The house was quiet, with Sarah asleep in the guest room and Miguel and Luis on air mattresses in the office. I padded down to the kitchen in slippers, savoring the stillness before the day's chaos. The turkey needed to go into the oven by 7 if we wanted to eat by 2, which meant I had work to do. I put on coffee and began the familiar process of preparing the bird, removing it from its brine, patting it dry, and massaging herb butter under the skin. The methodical work centered me, and by the time Sarah wandered downstairs in search of caffeine, I was fully in my element. "Good morning, chef," she said with a sleepy smile. "Orders for your sous chef." From that moment, the day unfolded with the controlled chaos of any large meal preparation, but with an undercurrent of joy I had never experienced during tense family Thanksgivings past. Miguel and Luis joined us, and the kitchen became a coordinated dance of activity, with each person taking charge of different dishes. My first guests, beyond those who had stayed overnight, began arriving around 11. Frank from next door appeared with his promised homemade rolls to supplement mine, along with black and white photos of Thanksgivings from the 50s that had belonged to his late wife. For atmosphere, he explained, placing them carefully on a side table. Jasmine and Tyler came with their vineyard wines, and additional friends, a couple named Henry and Grace, who brought a vegetarian wild rice dish. Colleagues from my restaurant arrived in waves, some directly from morning shifts bearing additional desserts and side dishes to add to our feast. By noon, my farmhouse hummed with activity and conversation. The dining room table stretched to its full length with the added leaves covered in my grandmother's tablecloth that I had secretly taken when I moved the one possession from my childhood home I could not bear to leave behind. Mismatched chairs lined the sides, supplemented by benches and even hay bales covered with quilts for the overflow seating we would need. Aunt Catherine arrived at 12:30, her arms laden with flowers and a bottle of expensive bourbon. For fortification, she whispered, hugging me tightly. "This is wonderful, Abby. Your mother has no idea what she is missing." By 1:30, the house was filled with 26 people, a number that still astonishes me when I think back on it. Every surface in the kitchen held a dish keeping warm or waiting to be served. The turkey rested under foil, its skin golden and crisp, and the volume of conversation and laughter had reached a festive pitch. At precisely 2 o'clock, I rang a bell to gather everyone to the table. People found spots, some sitting, some standing around the edges, wine glasses, and cocktails in hand. I looked around at these faces, some familiar and dear to me for years, others new friends I had only just made, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Before we eat," I said, my voice catching slightly, "I want to thank you all for being here. A month ago, I thought I would be spending this holiday somewhere else, continuing traditions that were not of my choosing. Instead, I find myself surrounded by people who are here by choice, not obligation. I cannot tell you how much that means to me." Aunt Catherine raised her glass. "To chosen family," she said, her eyes meeting mine with understanding. "To chosen family," the group echoed, and we began to pass dishes. The meal itself was everything I had hoped for as a chef. The heritage turkey was succulent, the stuffing savory with mushrooms and herbs, the mashed potatoes creamy with just the right amount of garlic, much more than my mother would have approved of. But it was the atmosphere that made it truly special. Conversations flowed freely. Stories were shared. Connections were made between people from different parts of my life. No one checked the time or mentioned having to leave early for another obligation. No one criticized the seasoning or complained about sitting next to a particular person. There were no tense political discussions or passive-aggressive comments about life choices, just genuine enjoyment of food and company. After the main meal, as people helped clear plates and serve dessert, the party naturally spread throughout the house. Some gathered in the living room to digest, others helped wash dishes despite my protests, and a few wandered outside to explore the property in the crisp November afternoon. Someone put on music, and an impromptu dance party broke out in the area we had cleared by pushing back the furniture. My sous chef Miguel, 3 glasses of wine in, demonstrated professional-level salsa moves with anyone willing to partner with him. Throughout the evening, phones came out to capture the celebration. Photos of the food, the table setting, groups of friends with arms around each other, all shared on various social media platforms. I posed for countless pictures, my cheeks flushed with cooking, heat, and happiness. When someone suggested a group photo on the porch, all 26 of us squeezed together laughing as we tried to fit in the frame. "This is going on Instagram for sure," said Jasmine, reviewing the perfect shot she had captured. "Best Thanksgiving ever." I noticed she had tagged me in the post, but thought nothing of it. Many of my friends from the culinary world had large social media followings, and I was used to appearing in their posts about food events. As the evening progressed, the gathering evolved. Some guests departed with containers of leftovers while a core group settled in for the duration. Frank regaled younger guests with stories from his 50 years as a high school teacher. Aunt Catherine, having discovered a kindred spirit in Sarah, shared embarrassing stories from my childhood that had my friends howling with laughter. By midnight, the remaining guests had moved to the living room where I had lit a fire in the old stone fireplace. Wine bottles were nearly empty, dessert plates held nothing but crumbs, and the conversation had turned reflective as it often does in late hours. "You know," said Tyler, his arm around Jasmine as they curled together on my couch, "I was dreading Thanksgiving this year. Being away from family, the obligation of it all. But this was real. Thank you, Abby." Others murmured agreement, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the wine. I had created something authentic and meaningful. Not out of obligation, but out of a desire to connect. In turning rejection into opportunity, I had found something I had not even known I was missing. Throughout the day, I had not checked my phone once. There were no messages from my parents, no calls to see how I was spending the day alone as they must have imagined. Their silence spoke volumes about their assumptions and priorities. But for the first time in my adult life, their approval or attention did not matter to my enjoyment of a holiday. As I looked around at the friends still gathered in my living room, some now dozing on couches and chairs, I realized I had found my own definition of family, one based on mutual care and genuine affection rather than obligation and appearances. It was a revelation that would change everything in the days to come. The morning after Thanksgiving dawned, bright and cold sunlight streaming through the windows of my farmhouse to reveal the evidence of the previous day's celebration. Empty wine bottles lined the kitchen counter, serving dishes were stacked haphazardly in the sink, and various friends were asleep throughout the house, having stayed over rather than driving home late. I made coffee and began quietly cleaning up, enjoying the peaceful aftermath of a successful gathering. Sarah joined me first, her hair tousled from sleep, followed gradually by the others who had spent the night. We worked together preparing a breakfast of turkey hash with leftover vegetables and eggs from my neighbor's chickens. As we ate around the kitchen island, recounting favorite moments from the day before, I finally checked my phone for the first time in nearly 24 hours. What I found was startling: 37 text messages, 12 missed calls, and numerous notifications from social media. "What on earth?" I muttered, scrolling through the texts. The first few were from acquaintances complimenting the Thanksgiving photos that had been posted. But midway through the list, the tone changed dramatically, with a message from my brother David: "Mom is having a complete meltdown about your Thanksgiving party. Call her ASAP." Following that were increasingly frantic texts from my mother, culminating in, "We need to talk now. Call me the minute you get this." I set my phone down, my appetite suddenly gone. "I think my parents found out about our gathering," I told Sarah, showing her the messages. "Was it supposed to be a secret?" Miguel asked, looking confused. "Not exactly," I explained. "They uninvited me from their Thanksgiving, saying they wanted a smaller, more intimate gathering. I just did not tell them I was hosting my own event." "Which exploded into the most epic Friendsgiving ever," Luis added with a grin. "Exactly. And now it seems they have somehow seen the pictures." Sarah picked up my phone and navigated to Instagram, where she whistled softly. "Mystery solved. The group photo from last night has over 1,000 likes and dozens of comments. Jasmine tagged you, and it looks like someone named Thomas Martin commented, 'Is that Aunt Abby?' My nephew," I groaned. "He is only 6, but apparently already on Instagram. Which means my brother saw it, which means my parents now know." As if on cue, my phone began to ring with my mother's ringtone. The friends gathered in my kitchen exchanged glances. "You do not have to answer that," Sarah said quietly. I took a deep breath. "No, I think I do. This conversation has been coming for a long time." I accepted the call and put it on speaker. "Hello, Mom." Abigail Jean Martin. My mother's voice was tight with anger. "Would you care to explain the photos I am looking at right now? You told us you were fine with having a quiet Thanksgiving on your own." I noticed she did not mention that they had been the ones to uninvite me in the first place. "I never said I would be alone, Mom. I said you should have a lovely, quiet Thanksgiving, which I hope you did. Do not play word games with me, young lady. You deliberately deceived us. Your father and I are extremely upset." You hosted a massive party without telling us, invited your Aunt Catherine, who told us she was sick, and plastered it all over the internet to embarrass us. The accusation was so outlandish I almost laughed. Embarrass you? How exactly did I embarrass you by hosting friends at my own home? Everyone can see what you did, she exclaimed. All our friends are calling to ask why we were not at your beautiful Thanksgiving dinner. What are we supposed to tell them? That our own daughter excluded us. The irony was breathtaking. I looked around at my friends who were trying their best to appear busy while obviously listening to every word. Mom, you and Dad told me not to come to your Thanksgiving. You said you wanted space. I respected that and made alternative plans. I did not post anything to embarrass you. We asked for a small family Thanksgiving, she countered. Not for you to throw an elaborate dinner for strangers instead of your own parents. If you were hurt, you should have said something, not orchestrated this. This spectacle. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I got whenever my mother twisted a situation to make herself the victim. But this time, something was different. Perhaps it was the presence of my friends witnessing this manipulation firsthand. Perhaps it was the confidence that came from creating such a successful gathering on my own. Whatever the reason, I found myself unwilling to accept her version of events. Mom, I said firmly, you specifically told me to skip Thanksgiving this year. Your exact words were that you needed space and were planning a smaller gathering, which turned out to include David and his family, but not me. I respected your wishes, painful as they were, and created a beautiful holiday with people who actually wanted me present. I did not do it to spite you or embarrass you. I did it because I deserved to enjoy Thanksgiving too. Put your father on, she demanded clearly, not hearing a word I had said. There was a rustling sound, and then my father's voice came on the line. Abby, what were you thinking? He asked, his tone that of a disappointed parent addressing a wayward child, despite the fact I was 32 years old. Your mother is very upset. Several of our friends saw those photos and asked about the beautiful dinner at your new place. Do you have any idea how that made us look? Again, the focus on appearances rather than the actual issue. I am sorry if you were embarrassed, Dad, but I did nothing wrong. You and Mom uninvited me from your Thanksgiving. I found another way to celebrate. End of story. It is not that simple, and you know it, he insisted. You were deliberately deceitful. If you were planning such an elaborate event, you should have invited us. The audacity of that statement left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it was steadier than I expected. Let me make sure I understand. You uninvite me from your Thanksgiving, tell me you need space from me, and now you are angry that I did not turn around and invite you to mine. That makes absolutely no sense. Do not take that tone with me, my father warned. What tone would you prefer? I asked, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. The one where I apologize for things that are not my fault. The one where I pretend it did not hurt when you excluded me from a family holiday for the first time in my life. I have been using that tone for years. Dad and I am tired of it. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When my father spoke again, his voice was cold. I see. Well, perhaps we do need space, if this is your new attitude. Perhaps we do, I agreed, and was shocked to realize I meant it. After I hung up the kitchen, remained silent for a long moment. Then Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. I am proud of you, she said simply. The confrontation with my parents was followed by a call from my brother David, ostensibly to smooth things over, but actually to scold me for upsetting our parents. Could you not just have gone along with it for 1 year? He asked, exasperation evident in his voice. You know how Mom and Dad are. Now they are going to be impossible to deal with for months. Why should I have to be the one to always accommodate them? I countered. Why did not you speak up when they excluded me? His uncomfortable silence told me everything I needed to know. David had always been the favored child, the one who followed the expected path, and he had no interest in disrupting that dynamic, even at my expense. As my friends gradually departed that day, each with containers of leftovers and warm hugs, I was left to process the fallout of the confrontation. Aunt Catherine called to check on me, having received her own blistering phone call from my mother. You stood your ground beautifully, she reassured me. It is about time someone did. In the days that followed, I received several text messages from my mother, each more manipulative than the last. First came anger. I cannot believe you would disrespect us this way. Then guilt. Your father and I have done everything for you. Finally, she attempted to minimize the entire situation. You are blowing this out of proportion. It was just one Thanksgiving. I responded to each message calmly but firmly, refusing to accept blame for a situation they had created. It was exhausting but also strangely liberating, like exercising muscles I had never used before. The most surprising development came a week after Thanksgiving, when my phone lit up with messages from extended family members and my parents' friends. Word had spread about what had happened, likely through Aunt Catherine and the social media posts, and many were reaching out to express support for me. Your mother has always played favorites, wrote my father's sister, with whom I had never been particularly close. Good for you for standing up for yourself. Those photos of your Thanksgiving were beautiful, messaged one of my mother's oldest friends. She had no right to exclude you. These messages confirmed what I had long suspected, but never fully acknowledged the unhealthy patterns in my family were visible to others, and I was not wrong to finally set boundaries. The hardest part was the silence that followed my stand. After years of daily calls and constant contact, communication with my parents dwindled to almost nothing. There were moments when I second-guessed myself, when the weight of being the bad daughter felt crushing. But each time those doubts crept in, I reminded myself of the warmth and authenticity of the Thanksgiving I had created, contrasted with the conditional love and manipulation I had accepted for too long. December arrived with snow blanketing my Vermont farmhouse, transforming it into the winter wonderland I had dreamed of when purchasing the property. With Christmas approaching, the silence from my parents grew increasingly noticeable. In previous years, by this time, my mother would have called dozens of times about holiday plans, gift lists, and her expectations for my participation in family traditions. The quiet was both peaceful and unsettling. I found myself instinctively reaching for my phone to call her, then stopping, unsure if I should be the one to bridge the gap. The wound of being excluded from Thanksgiving was still fresh, but the prospect of a similar estrangement at Christmas weighed heavily on me. I decided to seek professional help, finding a therapist in a nearby town who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Janine Moore listened carefully as I recounted the Thanksgiving situation and the patterns that had led to it. What you are describing, she said during our second session, sounds like a family system that requires you to play a specific role, the dutiful daughter who never challenges the status quo. When you moved away and established more independence, you disrupted that system, and their response was to punish you with exclusion. Her words crystallized something I had felt but couldn't articulate. So it wasn't about needing a smaller Thanksgiving at all, I said slowly. It sounds more like an attempt to bring you back in line, Dr. Moore suggested. The question now is, what kind of relationship do you want with your parents going forward? You can't change them, but you can set clear boundaries about how you're willing to be treated. Those sessions helped me gain clarity about my own needs and expectations. I began to see that while I loved my parents, I had been allowing them to dictate the terms of our relationship in ways that were harmful to my well-being. The realization was painful but necessary. 2 weeks before Christmas, I received an unexpected letter in the mail, handwritten on my father's personal stationery. Unlike the texts and calls filled with accusations, this message had a different tone. Dear Abby, it began. I have been reflecting on our conversation after Thanksgiving and on the events that led to it. While I don't agree with how you handled the situation, I can acknowledge that your mother and I may have hurt you with our request that you skip the holiday this year. That was not our intention. Your happiness has always been important to us, even if we haven't always shown it in ways you recognize. I miss our Sunday calls. Perhaps we could meet for coffee next time you're in Connecticut, Dad. It wasn't an outright apology, but from my father it was significant. I called him the next day and we had a stilted but civil conversation. We agreed to meet at a cafe halfway between our homes the following weekend, neutral territory where neither of us would have the home field advantage. That meeting was awkward, with long silences and careful navigation around sensitive topics. But it was a start. My father admitted in his roundabout way that they had taken me for granted over the years. "You were always so reliable," he said, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I suppose we came to expect that you would accommodate whatever we needed." "That doesn't make it right," I pointed out. "No," he agreed after a moment. "I suppose it doesn't." Progress with my mother was slower. When she finally called her, initial approach was to act as though nothing had happened, chatting about neighborhood gossip and David's children. When I gently brought up Thanksgiving, she became defensive. "I don't see why we're still discussing this," she said. "It was one holiday." "It's not about the holiday," I explained. "It's about feeling valued and respected as part of this family." She was quiet for a long moment. "I've never been good at this kind of conversation," she finally admitted. "Your father says I need to listen more." "That would be a start," I agreed. Over several more conversations, pieces of truth emerged. My mother, it turned out, had been struggling with my move to Vermont more than I realized. "You've built this whole life without us," she said during one call. "Your successful career, that beautiful house, all those interesting friends. Sometimes I look at the life your father and I have, and it seems small by comparison." I suppose part of me was jealous. The admission stunned me. I had never thought of my mother as someone who could be jealous of me. In my mind, she had always been the confident one, the arbiter of family standards that I constantly strived to meet. "Mom, that's not how I see it at all," I told her. "I've always admired you and Dad. Everything I've accomplished is because of the foundation you gave me." "Even your cooking?" she asked, with a hint of her old humor. "You certainly didn't get that from my side of the family." It was a small moment of connection, but it felt significant. As Christmas approached, we reached a tentative truce. My parents would host Christmas Eve at their home with David's family, as was tradition. I would join them, bringing my signature desserts. Then on Christmas Day, they would drive up to Vermont to see my farmhouse for the first time and have a quiet dinner, just the three of us. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it acknowledged both their need for tradition and my new independent life. It was, I realized, the first time we had negotiated a holiday as adults, with equal say rather than me simply conforming to their expectations. Christmas Eve at my parents' house was less tense than I had feared. My mother made a visible effort to include me in conversations, and my father proudly showed off my cookbook to a neighbor who stopped by. There were still moments of old patterns, like my mother's subtle comparison of my career to David's more conventional path, but I found I could let them slide without the old sting. Christmas Day, with my parents visiting my farmhouse, was the true revelation. Seeing them in my space, my mother admiring the kitchen renovation I had done myself, my father exploring the small orchard with genuine interest, shifted something in our dynamic. They were guests in my home, seeing me in my element, perhaps for the first time understanding that I had built a life that was different from theirs, but equally valid. Over dinner, my mother surprised me by raising her glass. "To new traditions," she said, meeting my eyes with unusual directness, "and to a daughter who has the courage to create her own path." The months that followed brought a gradual rebuilding of our relationship, with both progress and setbacks. There were still difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But there was also a new foundation of mutual respect that had not existed before. When the following November approached, I initiated the conversation about Thanksgiving plans myself, suggesting a new arrangement. "What if we alternate?" I proposed. "This year at your house, next year at mine, with everyone included each time." My mother's immediate agreement suggested she had been wondering the same thing. "I think that would be lovely," she said. "And I promise not to criticize your garlic levels." "And I promise not to post photos designed to make you look bad," I teased, gratified when she actually laughed. That next Thanksgiving at my parents' house included not only the traditional family members, but also Sarah and Aunt Catherine, who had become unlikely friends since bonding at my Friendsgiving. The holiday wasn't perfect, there were still moments of tension, but it felt more authentic than any family gathering I could remember. And the following year, true to our agreement, my parents came to my farmhouse for Thanksgiving, joining a smaller but still vibrant gathering of friends and family. Watching my mother exchange recipes with Miguel and my father deep in conversation with Frank about heritage apple varieties, I felt a sense of integration I had never thought possible. The lesson I learned through that difficult Thanksgiving rejection wasn't what I expected. It wasn't about choosing between family of origin and chosen family, but about creating space for both on terms that honored my needs as well as theirs. It was about recognizing that true family connections, whether by blood or by choice, must be based on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation or appearances. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most painful rejections can lead us to the most authentic acceptance if we have the courage to stand in our truth and create new paths forward. I still look back on that first Friendsgiving in my farmhouse as a turning point, not just in my relationship with my parents, but in my understanding of myself. In turning rejection into celebration, I discovered a strength and resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Have you ever experienced a similar situation where family rejection led to unexpected growth? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Thank you for listening to my journey from exclusion to creating my own inclusive traditions. Remember that sometimes the family we create is as important as the family we were born into. Wishing you all holidays filled with authentic connections and joy, whether they follow traditions or forge new paths entirely.